So spread is all about communicating the vision of the transformation. And in that communication, you also demonstrate leadership's commitment to the transformation journey. It's the first very important phase. You have to be careful not to just stop there, but to do it really, really well, right? Now, spread, interestingly enough, is usually done by senior leadership. That's because that's the place in the organization where most of the big ideas come from. The interesting thing about senior leadership is if you look at sort of psychological temperament models, senior leadership is usually dominated by rationals. And rationals are great idea people, they're great problem solvers, but they tend to focus on things like earnings and performance and things that have a lot of intellectual sense or a lot of rational sense, but may or may not resonate on the soccer field with the average day-to-day worker. So, in order to successfully navigate the spread phase and create a vision, there are three things that those rationals need to keep in mind. The first is that it needs to be a really big idea. Rationals are wonderful, but they can be distracted. They move on to the next big idea, and change of the month programs generally don't work very well in the organization because you don't set a long enough direction for people to actually follow it. So bundle the idea into a really big transformation. Second thing that helps is to translate those ideas into language that resonates up and down in the organization, right? Senior leaders worry about different things than frontline people. Had a conversation with the CEO of a large testing company, and he made the casual observation that in his organization, he thought that the vast majority of people didn't care if they were selling tomatoes for a living. Now, it was interesting because he was talking about people who are trained lab technicians and phlebotomists, and the reality is they don't want to be migrant farm workers. But what he was insightful about was they didn't care if the organization made more money. They cared about patient outcomes, how difficult it was to do their job, whether or not it was easy or hard to do the paperwork, and those sorts of things. And so you have to translate the making more money idea into something that also translates into making the job better, easier, or having better outcomes. The last thing that you have to do well in a spread campaign is make it real, but make it visceral, make it visual, make a real case for change that people have a hard time walking away from. Death by PowerPoint generally doesn't work with the average kind of a person. And so if you want the spread message to get across, do everything you would do in a great marketing campaign to make it work. There's a wonderful example in Dan Heath's book, Switch, about a purchasing agent that wanted to convince his organization to go to a more centralized, more professional purchasing. And instead of creating a PowerPoint deck that he gave to senior managers, he had an intern go out and buy 426 different pairs of work gloves, one of each kind that they bought, dumped them on a table with the price that they were paid, and asked the executives to look at them. And as they were wondering why they had so many different versions of what was a pretty simple thing and why they were paying from $3 to $27 for the exact same item, it made the case to them that maybe they really needed to do something about it. And that program was launched very, very successfully. So make sure it's big, make sure it resonates, and make it real and marketed and visual. Next, we're going to talk about the second phase of the journey, which is how you make it happen once. And that's the shift phase, getting it done at least once in the organization.